The rain was relentless, hammering the windows of our San Francisco Victorian like it wanted to break through and drown us both. I stood frozen in the living room, staring at the photo of my late wife, Mara, her smile as bright as the day we met. Then I heard it. Ezra's voice, sharp and trembling, cutting through the storm. "Julian, I can't keep pretending anymore." I turned to face him. Ezra, my stepson, stood in the doorway, his green eyes blazing with something I'd never seen before. At 24, he carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken truths, his broad shoulders tense under his soaked jacket. We'd been orbiting each other for months, caught in a dance of glances and silences, but this moment felt like a dam breaking. It started innocently enough. 6 months ago, I was just a widower trying to piece my life back together after Mara's death. She'd been gone 2 years, and the grief still clung to me like damp fog. Ezra had moved in to help with the house. His mother's house, the one we'd all shared before cancer stole her away. He was her son from her first marriage, but I'd raised him since he was 10. Back then, he was all scraped knees and comic books. Now he was a man, and the air between us had shifted in ways I couldn't name. That night, I'd been nursing a glass of bourbon. My shoulders knotted from hours hunched over client reports. Ezra had noticed, as he always did. "You look like you're carrying the world, Jules," he said, his voice soft but teasing. He'd always called me Jules, never Dad, a boundary we both respected. "Let me help." Before I could protest, he was behind me, his hands firm on my shoulders, kneading the tension away. His touch was steady, deliberate, and I closed my eyes, letting the warmth of his fingers melt the ache. But then his hands lingered, tracing slow circles, and the room felt smaller, the air thicker. I turned my head slightly, catching his reflection in the window. His eyes were locked on me, not with the casual ease of a stepson, but with something deeper, something that scared me as much as it pulled me in. "Ezra?" I whispered, my voice barely audible over the rain. "What are we doing?" He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped closer, his breath warm against my neck. My heart pounded, a traitor to the logic screaming in my head. This was wrong, every rule, every boundary, every shred of sense told me so. But when his hand brushed mine, tentative and searching, I didn't pull away. The next morning, the house felt different, like it was holding its breath. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the coffee maker as it hissed and sputtered, trying to make sense of the night before. Ezra had left for his bartending shift at a dive bar in the Mission District, and I was grateful for the space. My mind was a battlefield, guilt clashing with desire, memory warring with possibility. Mara's photo on the mantel seemed to watch me, her eyes asking questions I couldn't answer. I'd met Mara at a poetry reading in Oakland, her laugh bright enough to light up the dim cafe. She was a painter, her canvases full of bold colors and wild dreams. When we married, Ezra was a quiet kid, still reeling from his parents' divorce. I'd promised to be there for him, to be a father figure without overstepping. And I'd kept that promise until now. Ezra came home that evening, his hair damp from the fog, his expression unreadable. "We need to talk," he said, tossing his keys on the counter. I nodded, my throat tight. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where we'd shared countless meals, where Mara had once sketched Ezra's face while he did homework. Now it felt like a courtroom. "I know what you're thinking," he said, his voice steady but low. "That this is some phase, or I'm confused, or it's because of Mom. But it's not. I felt this for a long time, Jules. I just didn't know how to say it." I stared at him, my hands clenched under the table. "Ezra, I'm 42. You're 24. I'm your stepfather. It's not just complicated. It's impossible." "Is it?" he challenged, leaning forward. "Or are you just scared of what it means?" Because I'm not. I'm scared of losing you, of pretending I don't feel this way. His words hit like a punch. I wanted to argue, to list every reason why this couldn't work. Society, family, the ghost of Mara. But the truth was, I felt it too. That pull, that spark, that reckless need to be closer. I stood abruptly, pacing to the window, the city lights blurring through the glass. Ezra, this could ruin us, I said finally. Everything we've built, everything we are. He stood too, crossing the room in 3 strides. Or it could be the start of something real. Something honest. I turned to face him, and for a moment we were just 2 people, stripped of titles and roles. His hand reached for mine, and this time I let it stay. The weeks that followed were a tightrope walk. We didn't talk about that night again, but the air between us crackled with unspoken promises. Ezra would brush past me in the hallway, his shoulder grazing mine, and my pulse would spike. I'd catch him watching me while I read, his gaze soft but heavy with intent. We were playing with fire, and we both knew it. San Francisco was a city that celebrated love in all its forms, but even here, our situation felt like a secret we couldn't share. I started noticing the way people looked at us, at the grocery store, at the cafe where we grabbed coffee. Were they judging? Did they know? Or was it just my guilt painting suspicion on every face? One evening, we went to a local art gallery in Soma, a place Mara used to love. The walls were lined with vibrant abstracts, and the crowd buzzed with wine-fueled chatter. Ezra wandered off to study a painting, and I watched him from across the room. He was beautiful, not just in the way his dark hair caught the light, but in the way he moved, confident yet unguarded. A woman approached him, her smile flirty, and I felt a pang I couldn't name. Jealousy? Fear? Both? When he rejoined me, he nudged my arm. You okay? You look like you're about to punch a canvas. I forced a laugh. Just thinking about Mara. She'd have loved this. His face softened. She'd want you to be happy, Jules. You know that, right? I nodded, but the words felt hollow. Mara had been my anchor, my North Star. Could I betray her memory for something so uncertain, so forbidden? As we left the gallery, the fog rolled in, wrapping the city in a dreamy haze. Ezra stopped on the sidewalk, his breath visible in the cold. Jules, I don't want to push you, but I need to know. Are we going to keep running from this? I looked at him, his eyes searching mine, and for the first time, I let myself imagine a world where we didn't. The fog clung to San Francisco's streets like a lover who wouldn't let go, and I felt its weight in my chest as Ezra's question hung between us. I didn't answer him that night outside the gallery. Instead, I walked him home in silence, the city's hum filling the space where words should have been. But his eyes, those piercing green eyes, kept pulling me back, daring me to face the truth I'd been dodging for weeks. The next morning, I found Ezra in the backyard, pruning the jasmine Mara had planted years ago. He was shirtless, his lean frame moving with purpose, sweat glistening on his skin despite the cool air. I stood at the kitchen window, coffee cup forgotten in my hand, watching him. At 42, I'd spent years building walls around my heart after Mara's death. Ezra was tearing them down, one touch, one glance at a time. Morning, Jules, he called without looking up, as if he could feel my stare. You gonna help or just stand there gawking? I laughed, the sound breaking the tension in my chest. Didn't know you were such a gardener, I said, stepping outside. The air smelled of earth and flowers, and for a moment, it felt like we could be normal. 2 people sharing a sunny morning, nothing more. But normal wasn't our story. That afternoon, we drove to Ocean Beach, a place we hadn't visited since Mara's memorial. The waves roared, relentless and wild, mirroring the chaos in my head. We walked along the shore, the sand cold under our feet, and Ezra started talking about his life. His dreams of opening his own bar, his fear of being stuck in a city that felt too big, and too small all at once. I listened, marveling at how much he'd grown, how much I'd missed while I was lost in my grief. "You ever think about starting over?" he asked, kicking at a piece of driftwood. "Not just moving on, but building something new?" I stopped walking, the wind tugging at my jacket. "Every day," I admitted. "But it's hard to let go of the past when it's all I've got." He turned to face me, his expression fierce. "You've got me, Jules. You always have." The words hit harder than I expected. I wanted to reach for him, to pull him close and let the ocean drown out the world's judgment. But fear stopped me, fear of what it meant, of who we'd become if we crossed that line. That night, we cooked dinner together, a rare moment of domestic ease. The kitchen was warm with the scent of garlic and rosemary, and Ezra's laughter filled the space as he teased me about my terrible knife skills. For a moment, I could pretend we were just roommates, friends, anything but what we were. But when he reached past me to grab a spoon, his hand grazed my arm, and the air shifted again. "Jules," he said, his voice low, "we can't keep doing this, acting like nothing's changed." I set down the knife, my hands trembling. "Ezra, if we do this, if we even try, it changes everything. Your mom's family, our friends. This city, they won't understand." He stepped closer, his breath warm against my cheek. "I don't care about them. Care about you. About us." Before I could respond, he kissed me. It was soft at first, tentative, like he was giving me a chance to pull away. But I didn't. I kissed him back, my hands finding his face, the world narrowing to the heat of his lips and the pounding of my heart. It was reckless, forbidden, and yet it felt like the most honest thing I'd ever done. When we pulled apart, his eyes were wide, searching mine for regret. I didn't have any, not yet, but the weight of what we'd done settled over me like the fog outside. The next few days were a blur of stolen moments. A brush of hands in the hallway, a shared smile over coffee, a late-night talk on the couch that ended with us tangled together, hearts racing. But guilt was never far behind. Mara's memory lingered in every corner of the house, in the paintings on the walls, in the way Ezra tilted his head just like she used to. I started avoiding her photo, unable to meet her eyes. One evening, Ezra's aunt, Clara, came over for dinner. She was Mara's older sister, a no-nonsense lawyer with a knack for seeing through people. As we ate, her eyes darted between us, sharp and suspicious. "You two seem close lately," she said, her tone light but probing. Ezra shrugged, his smile easy. "Just keeping the old man company." I forced a laugh, but my stomach twisted. Clara didn't press, but her gaze lingered, and I knew she sensed something. After she left, Ezra turned to me, his expression serious. "We can't hide forever, Jules. People are going to notice." "I know," I said, my voice hoarse. "But what do we even call this? How do we explain it?" He took my hand, his grip firm. "We don't owe anyone an explanation. We just have to be honest with ourselves." But honesty was a luxury we couldn't afford. The next day, I got a call from my old friend Marcus, who'd known Mara and me since college. He wanted to meet for drinks, catch up. I agreed, hoping it would clear my head. At the bar, he leaned back in his chair, studying me. "You seem different, Julian. Lighter, maybe. You finally moving on." I hesitated, the truth burning in my throat. "Something like that," I said, forcing a smile. He raised an eyebrow. "You seeing someone?" I froze, my mind racing. If I told him about Ezra, it would change everything. Our friendship, my reputation, the fragile life I'd rebuilt. But lying felt like betraying Ezra, betraying us. I took a sip of my drink, the words stuck in my chest. "Not exactly," I said finally, hating myself for the cowardice. As the weeks passed, the tension grew. Ezra wanted more openness, more certainty. I wanted it too, but the fear of losing everything held me back. One night we fought, our voices echoing through the house. "I'm tired of hiding, Jules," he said, his eyes flashing. "I'm not ashamed of this. Are you?" "No," I snapped, but the word felt like a lie. I wasn't ashamed of him, but I was terrified of what it meant to love him. To love someone I'd raised, someone the world would never accept as mine. He stormed out, the door slamming behind him. I sat alone in the dark, the silence heavier than the rain ever was. For the first time, I wondered if letting him go was the only way to save us both. The house was too quiet without Ezra. He hadn't come home after our fight, and the silence gnawed at me, each tick of the clock a reminder of the words we'd thrown like knives. I sat on the couch, staring at the spot where we'd kissed, wondering if I'd pushed him away for good. I tried calling him, but his phone went straight to voicemail. Panic crept in, cold and sharp. Ezra had always been impulsive, but he'd never disappeared like this. I pictured him at his bar, pouring drinks and charming strangers, or worse, alone somewhere, nursing the hurt I'd caused. By midnight, I was pacing, my mind spiraling with worst-case scenarios. At 2 a.m., the door creaked open. Ezra stood there, his jacket damp from the drizzle, his face drawn. "I needed space," he said before I could speak. "But I'm not running away." Relief flooded me, but it was tinged with dread. "Where were you?" I asked, my voice rough. "A friend's place," he said, avoiding my eyes. "I just couldn't be here, not after last night." We stood there, the distance between us more than just the few feet of hardwood floor. I wanted to pull him close, to erase the fight and the fear, but I didn't know how. Instead, I said, "I'm sorry, Ezra. I didn't mean to make you feel like I'm ashamed of you." His eyes softened, but there was still a guarded edge to them. "Then what are you afraid of, Jules? Because I can't keep doing this halfway." I sank onto the couch, my hands scrubbing over my face. "It's not just about us. It's Mara's family, our friends, the way people will look at us. I raised you, Ezra. That's not something the world will just accept." He sat beside me, close enough that I could feel the warmth of him. "I know it's messy. I know it's hard. But I'd rather face that than lose you." His words broke something in me, a wall I'd built to keep the world at bay. I reached for his hand, and he let me take it, his fingers curling around mine. For the first time, I let myself believe we could find a way. The next few weeks were a delicate dance. We were careful, keeping our affection behind closed doors, but the secrecy was suffocating. Ezra pushed for more. He wanted to go out together, to hold hands in public, to live like any other couple. I wanted it too, but every time I thought about it, I saw Clara's suspicious eyes, Marcus's raised eyebrow, the judgment waiting to crash over us. One afternoon, we drove to Muir Woods, seeking refuge among the redwoods. The forest was quiet, the air cool and heavy with the scent of earth. We walked the trails, our shoulders brushing, and for a moment, it felt like we could outrun the world. Ezra stopped at a clearing, the sunlight filtering through the trees, and pulled me close. "This," he said, his voice low, "this is what I want. Just us, no one else's rules." I kissed him there, under the canopy of ancient trees, and for the first time I didn't care who might see. But the moment was fleeting. On the drive back, reality crept in. My phone buzzed with a text from Clara. "We need to talk about Ezra. Call me." My stomach sank. Clara had always been protective of Ezra, her only link to Mara. If she suspected something, she wouldn't let it go. I showed Ezra the text, and his jaw tightened. "What are you going to tell her?" he asked. "The truth," I said, the words heavy. "But not yet. I need time." He nodded, but I could see the hurt in his eyes. Time was a luxury we were running out of. Clara came over the next evening, her face a mask of concern. We sat in the living room, the same room where Ezra had first touched my shoulders, where everything had changed. She didn't waste time. Julian, something's going on with you and Ezra. I'm not blind. He's been different, distant with the family, secretive. And you're not yourself either. I swallowed hard, my hands clenching the armrests of my chair. He's just figuring things out, I said, hating how weak it sounded. She leaned forward, her eyes sharp. Don't lie to me, Julian. Mara trusted you with him. If something's wrong, I need to know. The accusation stung, but it wasn't wrong. Mara had trusted me to protect Ezra, not to fall in love with him. I wanted to tell Clara everything, to unburden myself, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I said, "He's fine, Clara. We're fine." She didn't believe me. I could see it in the way she pressed her lips together, the way she stood to leave. "I'm watching Julian," she said, "for Mara's sake." After she left, Ezra emerged from his room, his face pale. "She knows, doesn't she?" "Not yet," I said, "but she will." He crossed the room, his hands framing my face. "Then let's tell her. Let's tell everyone. I'm tired of hiding, Jules. I want us to be real." I wanted to say yes, to promise him the world. But the fear was still there, a shadow I couldn't shake. "Give me a little more time," I said, my voice breaking. "Please." He nodded, but the distance between us grew a little wider. The breaking point came a week later. Ezra had been working late shifts, and I'd been burying myself in work, trying to outrun the inevitable. One night, he came home with a bruise on his cheek, his eyes dark with anger. "Some guy at the bar," he said when I asked. "He saw us together last week, made some comments." I shut him up. My heart sank. "Ezra, you can't." "I can," he snapped. "I'm not ashamed of you, Jules. I'm not going to let some drunk asshole make me feel like I should be." I pulled him into my arms, the bruise on his cheek a stark reminder of the world outside our walls. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I'm so sorry." He clung to me, his anger giving way to something softer. "I just want you," he said. "All of you. No more hiding." I held him tighter, knowing we couldn't keep running. The truth was coming whether we were ready or not. The bruise on Ezra's cheek faded, but the mark it left on me didn't. Every time I looked at him, I saw the cost of our secrecy, the fights, the suspicion, the weight of a love we couldn't fully claim. I knew we couldn't keep living in the shadows, but the thought of stepping into the light felt like walking off a cliff. We tried to find normalcy in small moments. Sunday mornings at the farmer's market in No Valley, where we'd argue over which apples were best. Late nights watching old sci-fi movies, Ezra's head on my shoulder, his laughter a balm to my frayed nerves. But the world kept intruding. Clara called again, her voice colder this time, demanding to see Ezra. Friends noticed my distraction, their questions sharper, their glances heavier. One evening, we went to a queer poetry slam in the Castro, a place where we could blend in, where our closeness didn't raise eyebrows. The room was alive with words. Raw, beautiful, defiant. A poet, a young woman with a buzz cut and eyes like fire, read a piece about loving against the odds. "We are not their rules," she said, her voice trembling with conviction. "We are not their shame." Ezra squeezed my hand under the table, his eyes shining. "That's us," he whispered. "That's who we are." I wanted to believe him, to let her words rewrite the fear in my heart. But when we left, the cold air hit me, and reality came rushing back. We weren't just fighting rules. We were fighting a history, a family, a life I'd built with Mara. The next day, I found a letter tucked under the windshield of my car. No name, no signature, just a single line in sharp, angry script. "You're disgusting." My blood ran cold. I glanced around the street, half expecting to see someone watching, but it was just me and the fog. I crumpled the note, my hands shaking, and went inside to find Ezra. He was in the kitchen, humming as he chopped vegetables for dinner. I showed him the note, and his face darkened. "This is why we can't hide," he said, his voice low. "People already know, Jules. They're going to talk either way." "Who would do this?" I asked, my voice barely steady. "Clara? Someone from your bar." He shook his head. "Doesn't matter. What matters is what we do next." I wanted to scream, to tear the note into 1,000 pieces and pretend it never existed. But Ezra was right. Hiding hadn't protected us. It had only made us vulnerable. I took a deep breath, my decision crystallizing. "We tell Clara," I said. "Tomorrow." His eyes widened, a mix of relief and fear. "You sure?" "No," I admitted. "But I'm sure about you." Clara came over the next evening, her face tight with worry. We sat in the living room, the same photo of Mara watching us from the mantel. I could barely look at it. Ezra sat beside me, his knee brushing mine, a silent anchor. "Clara," I began, my voice unsteady. "There's something you need to know. Ezra and I, we're together." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Clara's face froze, her eyes darting between us. "Together?" she repeated, her voice sharp. "What does that mean, Julian?" "It means I love him," I said, the truth spilling out like water from a broken dam. "I know it's complicated. I know it's not what you expected. But it's real." Ezra took my hand, his grip steady. "We're not asking for your approval," he said. "But we're not hiding anymore." Clara stood, her hands trembling. "You raised him, Julian. You were his father. How could you do this to Mara?" Her words cut deep, but I held her gaze. "I loved Mara with everything I had. But she's gone, Clara. And Ezra, he's my future." She shook her head, tears in her eyes. "I need time," she said, her voice breaking. I can't do this right now." She left without another word, the door closing softly behind her. Ezra's hand tightened in mine, and I knew we'd just crossed a line we couldn't uncross. The fallout came quickly. Clara told the family, and the calls started pouring in. Angry voicemails, texts demanding explanations. Marcus stopped by, his face a mask of betrayal. "You should have told me," he said. "I could have handled it, Julian. But it's a lot." I nodded, my throat tight. "I know. I'm sorry." He left without promising to stay in touch, and the weight of his absence settled over me. But Ezra was there, his presence a quiet strength. We spent that night in the backyard, under the jasmine, the fairy lights casting a soft glow. "We'll get through this," he said, his voice firm. "Together." I wanted to believe him, but the world felt like it was closing in. The note on my car, Clara's tears, Marcus's disappointment, they were all reminders of the cost of our love. And yet, when Ezra looked at me, his eyes full of fire and hope, I knew I'd pay it 1,000 times over. The weeks after we told Clara were a storm of silence and shouting. Some of Mara's family cut us off entirely, their voicemails sharp with accusations. Others, like Ezra's cousin Lena, reached out with cautious support, her texts a lifeline in the chaos. But the world outside our home didn't soften. Another note appeared on my car, this one with worse words, and whispers followed us at the grocery store, the cafe, the places we'd once felt safe. Ezra refused to let it break him. "They'll get over it," he said one morning, his voice fierce as he poured coffee. "Or they won't. But we're not going anywhere." I admired his fire, but I was drowning. At 42, I'd built a life on stability, on being the man Mara needed, the man Ezra could rely on. Now, I was the man who'd upended everything, who'd chosen love over convention. The guilt was a constant ache, But so was the pull of Ezra's hand in mine, his laughter, his unwavering belief in us. One night, we went back to Ocean Beach, the place where we'd first dared to dream of a future. The waves were calmer now, the stars bright above the horizon. We sat on a blanket, the cold seeping through, and Ezra leaned against me, his head on my shoulder. "You ever regret it?" he asked, his voice soft. "Choosing this? Choosing me?" I turned to him, his face lit by moonlight, and the answer was easy. Not for a second. He smiled, a rare, unguarded smile, and kissed me. It was slow, deliberate, a promise we'd keep fighting for. As we sat there, wrapped in each other and the sound of the ocean, I realized that love wasn't just the spark. It was the courage to hold on when the world tried to tear you apart. We started rebuilding piece by piece. Lena invited us to her apartment for dinner, a small gesture that felt like a victory. We found a new coffee shop in the Mission, one where the baristas didn't whisper behind our backs. Ezra began talking about his bar again, sketching plans on napkins, his eyes bright with possibility. I went back to my client work, finding solace in the numbers, the predictability. But the past wasn't done with us. One afternoon, Clara showed up at the house, her face softer than I'd seen in weeks. "I've been thinking," she said, sitting across from us at the kitchen table. "I don't understand this. I don't know if I ever will. But Mara loved you both, and she'd want you to be happy. I'm trying, Julian. I'm trying to see it her way. It wasn't acceptance, not fully, but it was a start." Ezra reached for my hand under the table, and I squeezed it, a silent thank you. Months later, we stood in the backyard, the jasmine blooming brighter than ever. Ezra had hung new fairy lights, their glow casting shadows on the wooden bench where we'd first let ourselves dream. We were hosting a small gathering, Lena, a few new friends from the poetry slam, even Marcus, who'd come around after weeks of silence. The air was warm, filled with laughter and the clink of glasses. Ezra stood beside me, his arm around my waist, no longer hiding. "We made it," he whispered, his breath warm against my ear. I looked at him, at the life we were building, and felt the weight of Mara's memory shift. She wasn't a ghost haunting us anymore. She was a part of us, her love woven into the foundation of ours. "We did," I said, my voice steady. "And we're just getting started." As the night stretched on, I realized that love wasn't about perfection or approval. It was about choosing each other every day against the odds. Ezra's hand in mine, the jasmine in the air, the future unfolding before us. It was enough. More than enough.